The day came up the way it always did, red as a fresh cut and honest as a blade. Meereen pretended it was still a city and not a wound. From the terrace of the Great Pyramid, the brick maze looked almost peaceful. Flat roofs dotted with pots, narrow streets already fogged with cooking smoke, the harborside masts like a forest of black needles. Even the pyramids of the old families, those steep, arrogant teeth, caught the first light and turned it to gold. Yet the wind carried the truth. The low murmur of a crowd gathering by the gates. The distant clang of metal in the fighting pits she had closed and opened and closed again. As if a city could be trained by repetition the way a dragon could. And always, the sound from the far pyramid where her children lived. A rasping bellow like the earth itself arguing with the sky. Daenerys Targaryen rested both hands on the warm stone. She could feel the heat of yesterday stored in it, stubborn as an old grievance. Every ruler in this city, she said, not turning, has used fear as mortar. Tyrion Lannister's laugh was quiet, too practiced to be bitter. Mortar, wine, coin, whatever keeps the stones from falling. Ser Barristan Selmy stood as straight as the spear he still carried in his bones. Age had not bent him, it had simply made him more difficult to move. Fear is quick, your grace. That is why men return to it. It asks little of them. Missandei watched Daenerys, her eyes bright and steady. Grey Worm did not watch at all. He listened, a man made of attention. Daenerys turned then, letting them see her face, letting the wind whip her hair into a banner she had not asked for. My father used fire like a painter uses paint. He would have burned the city to make a picture of it. The word father felt strange in her mouth. She had built herself out of other words. Khaleesi, Mysa, breaker of chains. But the blood was there, silent and patient, a snake beneath the hearthstone. Tyrion's mismatched eyes held hers. You are not him. She wanted to believe that meant something, that it was not simply a wish dressed as counsel. No, she said, but I have what he would have killed for. 3 dragons. And if I use them the way he would have, if I burn streets and markets to win a war, then I will be his daughter in all the ways that matter. Ser Barristan's gaze sharpened, as if she had struck flint within him. Then do not do it. Simple, Tyrion said, and the word carried its own shadow. Until someone hides their army behind a city and dares you to choose. Daenerys looked out again. Far beyond Meereen's walls, the fields were not fields anymore but scarred earth. Trenches and piled timbers where slavers had ringed her like wolves. Their camps smoked in the distance. Their banners, Yunkai, Nugais, Volantis, flickered like tongues. The siege had become a kind of cruelty that pretended to be patient. She tasted ash and salt on the wind and made herself speak clearly, as if clarity could become law. Then I choose now, before they force it upon me. Fire is for soldiers. Fire is for siege engines. Fire is for ships that come to carry chains. Not for children. Not for bread lines. Not for women carrying water. Grey Worm's head turned, just slightly. He understood rules. Missandei's smile was small and fierce. They will say you are weak. They will say it anyway, Tyrion replied, and his voice held the weary amusement of a man who had heard too many lies repeated as prophecy. Daenerys lifted her chin. Let them. I will teach them the difference between restraint and mercy. Mercy is a gift. Restraint is a weapon. From above, a shadow passed over the terrace. Drogon's wings beat once, twice. A slow thunder that shook dust from the stones. The dragon's cry rolled across the city like a challenge. Daenerys watched him arc toward the far pyramid, black against a sky that was turning blue, and felt the familiar pull in her chest, the ache of power that wanted to be used. She pressed her palm to the stone again, grounding herself in heat and weight. Today, she said, we begin. The dragon pit was not a pit at all but a cage built out of old fear and new necessity. Brick walls rose around them like the inside of a furnace, and iron bars cut the light into harsh stripes. The air tasted of scorched meat and minerals, the tang of something alive that had never learned to apologize. Rhaegal paced along the length of his confinement, claws clicking against stone. Every step carried impatience, a rhythm that made the Unsullied tighten their grips. Viserion crouched in the shadowed corner, pale scales catching the torchlight and returning it in soft, mocking gold. Drogon was somewhere above, free enough to be dangerous. Daenerys could feel them before she saw them, as if her blood had become a rope tied to 3 storms. She lifted one hand, palm open, the gesture she had learned with Burns and Trust. "Rhaegal," she called, and her voice did not tremble. "Zaldrises." The dragon's head snapped toward her. His eyes were coals banked under green glass. Smoke curled from his nostrils, lazy and contemptuous. Ser Barristan stood close enough that she could feel the weight of his readiness. The old knight's instinct to interpose flesh between queen and fire. Grey Worm stood farther back, an anchor in bronze and discipline. Daenerys stepped forward until the heat kissed her face. The bars between them were thick, but she had stopped seeing them as protection. They were an insult. "You will fly when I call," she told Rhaegal. "You will burn what I point to, and you will stop when I say stop." Tyrion's voice drifted from behind, edged with dryness and a note of genuine curiosity. "How does one teach a dragon stop?" "With pain," Ser Barristan said softly, not approving, only naming the truth. "Or with bond." Daenerys kept her eyes on Rhaegal. She remembered the first time she had touched Drogon after he had fed. The slick warmth of blood on scales. The way her heart had been a fist in her throat and still she had not turned away. Bond was not a song. It was a chain of choices made without certainty. She made a small motion with her fingers. Grey Worm signaled, and 2 Unsullied dragged forward a heavy wooden frame bound with pitch-soaked cloth. It was a mock siege engine. Nothing more than timber and rope, but the shape was unmistakable. A thing meant to break walls, to hurl stones into streets. Daenerys pointed through the bars. "That." Rhaegal's lips peeled back, revealing teeth like curved knives. The dragon inhaled, and the air itself seemed to draw in with him. Heat pressed against Daenerys' skin, a promise of hurt. "Now," she said. Green fire erupted, not the orange of common flame but something brighter and crueler, as if the world had been split and its heart exposed. The wooden frame vanished in a roar. Pitch sizzled and ran like black rain. The Unsullied did not flinch. They had been trained to face worse than death. Daenerys held her arm steady. "Again," she commanded, and another frame was dragged forward. Another. A burst of dragonfire. Another swift, savage consumption. When the 3rd frame burned, she lifted her hand sharply. "Sek," she said. "Enough." For a heartbeat the fire continued, licking at the air like a hungry tongue. Then Rhaegal's jaws snapped shut. Smoke poured from his nostrils. His chest heaved. He stared at her as if deciding whether obedience was worth the insult. Daenerys did not look away. She lowered her hand slowly, as if she were lowering a sword. "Good," she murmured, and meant it, as one might praise a child who had learned a new word. Behind her, Tyrion exhaled. "Well," he said, "that answers my question. Not pain." "Not today," Daenerys replied. She stepped back, feeling sweat cooling on her spine. "We will drill them until it is instinct. They will learn that I am not asking." Ser Barristan's voice was careful. "And if they refuse?" Daenerys glanced at the charred stone, the ash still dancing in the torchlight. "Then I will learn what kind of queen I am," she said. "But not by burning a city to prove it." The chamber beneath the pyramid had once held treasure. The old masters loved to bury their wealth in darkness, as if coin and cruelty were shy things. Now it held a different kind of hoard. Maps, reports, lists of names, and the heavy silence of men deciding who would die. Tyrion spread parchment across the table, weighing the corners with bronze cups. The lines and marks were neat, but the reality they represented was mud and blood and screaming. "Here," he said, tapping with a short finger. "The main Giscari camp. Their siege engines are assembled along this ridge. Their infantry rotates through the trenches every 4 hours. Efficient, almost admirable if one ignores the slavery. Daenerys stared at the inked ridge. She could almost see the shape of the trenches, the bodies pressed into them, men sweating under leather and copper, telling themselves they were safe because the queen would not burn her own city. And here, Tyrion continued, sliding his finger toward the coast. The Volantene, they are proud, which means they will be slow to adapt. Their commanders dine in tents embroidered with elephants and tigers. Your dragons will be able to smell the roast and the perfume.
Sebaristans jau tiktanat.
If we strike their command tents, the army may break. If we strike their command tents, Tyrion corrected, the army will run. There's a difference. Missandei leaned in, the lantern light gilding her cheekbones. They will say you have become like them. Daenerys' eyes did not leave the map. They already say it, she replied. Every time I punish a master, every time I feed a slaver to a dragon. They call it savagery because it is not done with parchment. Grey Worm spoke, his voice low and precise. The Unsullied can march when the dragons strike. If the camps burn, they will flee toward the river. We can cut them down. Daenerys felt the pull again. Power's simple solution. Burn, break, and she forced her mind to be a blade instead of a flame. No, she said. We do not cut down men who throw away their swords. Tyrion's brows rose. Generous. Strategic, she corrected. They must carry this story back. They must tell their brothers that dragons are death to armies, and that I spare those who stop fighting. Ser Barristan nodded slowly, as if she had spoken the language he had been waiting to hear. That is how you win a realm, he said. Not by terror alone. Tyrion's mouth twisted. Terror has its place. The trick is putting it where it belongs. Daenerys looked up then, meeting his gaze. Tell me, Tyrion Lannister, you served a king who ruled with terror. I served a king who ruled with idiocy, Tyrion said. Terror was merely his hobby. A faint smile tugged at her, quick and gone. Then help me make terror a tool, not a thirst. He inclined his head. Gladly. Step 1. Do not burn Meereen. Step 1 is already law, Daenerys said. Tyrion moved a token. A small carved dragon she had not noticed until now afar. The city's edge to the ridge. We strike at night, he said. When the camps are dens, not armies. We burn the siege engines first, the supply wagons second, the command tents third. We do not chase them into the dark. We let them run into the dawn and into Grey Worm's spears. Grey Worm nodded once. His approval was not enthusiasm. It was permission. Missandei's eyes searched Daenerys' face. And the city? She asked softly. The people will hear the screams. Daenerys closed her eyes for a moment and pictured the streets below, the children who had begun to laugh again, the old men who still flinched when a whip cracked in memory. She opened her eyes and spoke as if making a vow before gods she had never met. The city will not burn, she said. If the slavers want a shield, they will learn what it means to hold one. Above them, somewhere beyond stone, Drogon cried again. The sound seeped down through the pyramid like heat through a hearth, and Daenerys felt it settle behind her ribs, waiting. Night made liars of distances. The camps looked small from above, mere beads of torchlight scattered across dark earth. But Daenerys knew each bead held men with knives and chains, men who would have put collars back on her people and called it peace. Drogon's scales were warm beneath her thighs, the ridges of his spine rising and falling like the breath of a mountain. The wind clawed at her, cold and sharp, carrying the stink of tallow fires and horse sweat. It also carried fear. She could smell it the way Drogon could, metallic and sour. She had learned to ride him by refusing to be gentle. Fear made the hands soft. Soft hands died. Rhaegal and Viserion flanked them, their wings beating in staggered rhythm. In the darkness, they looked like moving pieces of the night itself. Green bronze smoke on one side, pale gold on the other. Daenerys tightened her knees. Drogon dipped, and the world tilted. Torchlight rushed up toward them. Shouts rose from below, first confused, then frantic. Horns began to sound, thin and desperate. "Now," she said, though no one could hear her but Drogon, and perhaps whatever gods lived in fire. She pointed down toward the ridge where the siege engines waited. In the dimness they were hulking shapes. Catapults, trebuchets, towers on wheels. Things built to fling stone into streets and call it war. Drogon screamed, and the sound tore through the night like cloth. Men below stumbled, looking up, mouths open. Some raised crossbows. Some ran. Some stood frozen, as if the sight of a dragon had turned them back into children. Dragonfire erupted. It was not a single line but a blooming, ravenous river that poured over timber and rope and oiled cloth. The first trebuchet vanished in a flash of orange-white heat. The second caught fire and sagged, its thick arms turning black. A siege tower, braced and proud, became a torch so bright it turned the night around it into day. Daenerys could see faces now. She forced herself to look. She forced herself to remember that these were men, not marks on a map. Their screams were high and animal as they scrambled away, clothes burning, skin blistering. She kept Drogon's fire trained on wood and pitch, not on bodies, but flame was not a clever thing. It reached, took. She heard the hiss as Rhaegal's green fire struck the trenches, turning the packed mud into steaming glass. Viserion swept low over a line of wagons, his pale flame spilling like molten gold. Barrels exploded. Grain and dried fish and salted meat, weeks of supply, burned into nothing. Daenerys made herself lift her hand. "SEK?" she shouted into the wind, and whether Drogon understood the word or the tension in her knees, he pulled up, the fire cutting off in a sudden, shocking silence. They climbed hard, rising above the reach of bolts. Crossbow quarrels flew anyway, tiny black insects that fell short. Below, the camps were chaos. Men trampled each other. Horses broke their tethers and fled, dragging lines of rope behind them like tails. Commanders bellowed orders that dissolved into screams. Daenerys circled once, high enough now that the heat could not touch her, and scanned for Meereen's walls. They loomed in the distance, dark and solid. Behind them, the city slept, or pretended to. She could imagine mothers pressing children close, whispering prayers to gods that had never heard them before. She could imagine the fear, and she hated that she had brought it. But the city did not burn. "Again," she murmured, and pointed not toward the walls but toward the ridge's far end, where the largest siege tower waited like a threat made wood. Drogon dove, and the night screamed. Morning came with a pale, exhausted light, as if the sun itself had been kept awake by screaming. Smoke rose beyond the walls in thick fingers that smeared the horizon. The air over Meereen tasted of char and salt, and the city's sounds were wrong. Too quiet, too careful. Daenerys walked through the courtyard with soot on her skin and the lingering heat of Drogon still in her bones. Her boots left faint ash prints on the stone. Servants and freedmen watched her pass with eyes that held both worship and fear, and she could not blame them for either. Tyrion awaited her near the fountain, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked more awake than he had any right to, as if his mind had spent the night counting outcomes like coins. Grey Worm stood near him, helm under his arm. There was blood on his forearm, dark and drying. It was not his. His face remained carved from stone, but his eyes were alert, a man listening for the next command even while the last one still echoed. Missandei stepped forward. "Mysa," she said quietly. "The people." "I know," Daenerys interrupted, and hated the sharpness of her own voice. She forced it softer. "How many?" Grey Worm answered, because numbers were his language. "In the field, many. In the city, none. Some arrows fell inside the walls, but no houses burned. No children died." Ser Barristan exhaled as if he had been holding his breath since midnight. "Then you did it," he said. "You struck without becoming what they fear." Daenerys looked past them toward the distant smoke. Her hands felt strange, as if they belonged to someone else. "I still burned men," she said. "I smelled them." Tyrion's gaze did not flinch away. "War is not clean, Your Grace. The question is whether it is necessary, and whether it ends. She turned on him, sudden heat rising in her. And if it does not end? If they return with more ships, more men, more chains? Then you burn their armies again, Tyrion said simply. And again. And you do it until the act becomes a lesson. You are teaching them a new kind of fear. Daenerys watched the freedmen gathering at the courtyard's edge. Some held hands. Some clutched each other's sleeves. Their faces were turned toward her, waiting. They had been waiting their whole lives. For a master's order, for a whip's crack, for a mercy that never came. Now they waited for her. She walked toward them. They parted like water, making space, unsure whether to kneel. She stopped within arm's reach of a woman with scarred cheeks and hands rough from labor. A child clung to the woman's skirts, eyes wide. Daenerys knelt, lowering herself so that she was not a dragon on a pyramid but a woman on stone. The child flinched anyway. "I did not burn your city," Daenerys said, speaking loudly enough that those behind could hear. "I did not burn your homes. The men who would have chained you again are burning outside these walls. They built engines to throw stones into your streets. Those engines are ash." The woman's throat bobbed. "Will they come again?" she whispered. "Yes," Daenerys answered, "because lies were the easy poison. They will come again until they learn. But hear me, I will not make you pay for their cruelty. I will not turn you into their shield. If they hide behind children, I will tear their arms from their bodies before I burn the child." Tyrion made a sound behind her that might have been approval or dismay. Ser Barristan's face was solemn. Missandei's eyes shone. The child stared at Daenerys, then slowly reached out and touched the soot on her cheek with one small finger. Daenerys held still, letting the touch land like a blessing and a burden. When she rose, the courtyard seemed smaller. She looked at Tyrion and Grey Worm and Ser Barristan. "Send ravens," she ordered, "to Volantis, to Karth, to every port that trades in flesh. Tell them what happened tonight. Tell them Meereen stands. Tell them the Dragon Queen burns armies, not cities." The wind shifted, bringing fresh smoke and the distant, fading scream of a dying camp. Daenerys lifted her chin and made herself listen to it without blinking. The slavers came by sea because they thought the water would cool dragonfire, because they thought ships could move where armies could not. Their galleys entered the bay like knives sliding between ribs, red sails furled and hulls bristling with scorpions. They wanted her to see them. They wanted to remind Meereen that the world still knew how to threaten. Daenerys stood on the harbor wall beside Tyrion and watched them settle at anchor beyond arrow range. The bay was dotted with small fishing boats, men hauling nets, children perched like gulls on the piers. The slavers had not chosen an empty sea. They had chosen a place with witnesses. "They're daring you," Tyrion said. "Yes," Daenerys replied. Her voice was calm, but her stomach tightened. "They want me to burn the harbor and call it victory." Grey Worm had already begun moving people away from the water, his commands sharp and efficient. Missandei walked among the freedmen, coaxing, urging. Some resisted, unwilling to abandon their boats, their livelihood. Fear made them stubborn. Daenerys lifted her hands to the wind. The air tasted of salt and tar and something else. Perfume from the Volantine decks, heavy and sweet, like rot hidden under flowers. She could feel Drogon above the city, circling, impatient. Rhaegal and Viserion prowled the sky farther out, their shadows slipping across waves. Daenerys turned to Tyrion. "If I let them sit there, the city starves," she said. "If I strike too close, the harbor burns." Tyrion's mouth tightened. "Then you do what you did on land. Precision, discipline, make the sea your field." She did not smile. "Dragons are not arrows." "No," Tyrion agreed. "They are storms. But storms can be predicted." Daenerys walked to the edge of the wall and looked down at the water, blackening with dusk. The first stars were pricking through the sky like pinholes. Somewhere below, a child cried as their mother pulled them away. The sound scraped at her. She closed her eyes and called Drogon with her mind the way she had learned to, not with words but with need. The air shifted. A shadow fell over the wall. Heat washed across her skin. When she opened her eyes, Drogon's head was near, his black scales reflecting the last light. His eye regarded her with the ancient arrogance of something that had never needed permission. "Not the harbor," Daenerys whispered, and touched his jaw, feeling the roughness of scale. "Not them." Drogon's nostrils flared. He tasted the sea, the ships, the fear. His wings unfurled, and the wind whipped her cloak into a snap. Daenerys swung up onto his back with practiced motion. The world dropped away as he launched. She felt the pull in her stomach, the sudden freedom, the dizzying clarity that came with leaving stone and consequence behind. The Volantene ships rose toward her as she climbed, their decks crowded with men pointing and shouting. Scorpions creaked as they were aimed, bolts as long as spears glinting in the fading lig. She guided Drogon out over open water, farther than the fishing boats, farther than the piers. Rhaegal and Viserion joined them, a triangle of wings above the bay. Daenerys raised her arm and pointed at the largest galley, its prow carved like a tiger, its deck lined with armored men. "That," she said, the word ripped away by wind but carried in her intention. "Drogon dove." The scorpion bolts loosed, slicing the air with hateful hiss. One passed so close she felt the wind of it tug at her hair. Drogon twisted, not graceful, but savage, and the bolt missed. His fire erupted, a torrent aimed not at the waterline where it would spread and threaten the bay, but at the deck and masts. Sailcloth ignited in an instant, ropes snapped and fell flaming. Men screamed and ran, armor turning into ovens around their bodies. Rhaegal's green flame lanced across a second ship, consuming its scorpion crew. Viserion swept over a third, his pale fire turning the mast into a torch that leaned and cracked. Daenerys forced herself to keep them moving, never lingering above the harbor, always striking farther out, dragging the battle seaward like a net pulling fish away from shore. The ships burned bright against dark water, their reflections trembling like shattered suns. Below, fishermen watched from a safer distance, faces upturned. Some crossed themselves, some fell to their knees. Some simply stared, stunned by the sight of war contained. When Drogon pulled up, Daenerys tasted salt and smoke and iron. The bay was alive with the crackle of burning wood and the frantic splashing of men leaping into water that would not save them from heat. "Enough," she commanded, and felt Drogon's chest heave beneath her as he obeyed. Meereen's harbor remained intact. The sea beyond it became a grave. War did not always come with banners and ships. Sometimes it came with a knife in an alley and a mask that hid cowardice behind gold. The night after the bay burned, the sons of the Harpy struck harder than they had in weeks, as if the sight of slavers dying at sea had driven them into frenzy. They attacked patrols, they attacked markets closing for the night, they attacked any freedman they could reach with the speed of hatred. Daenerys was in the pyramid when the first messenger arrived, breathless, eyes wide. Then another, until the chamber filled with the sense of a city bleeding in small cuts. She rode out with Ser Barristan and a knot of Unsullied, Tyrion beside her on a smaller horse that looked mildly offended by being asked to carry him. The streets were slick with spilled water and the first smear of blood. Oil lamps cast trembling pools of light that made every shadow look like a threat. They found the fighting in a narrow lane where brick walls rose close on either side, trapping sound and fear. The Unsullied had formed a shield wall around a cluster of freedmen, women clutching baskets, a man with a child on his shoulders, two old men with knives that shook in their hands. Outside the wall, masked men darted like insects, striking at exposed flesh, vanishing back into darkness. Grey Worm was in the thick of it, spear flashing, short sword in his other hand. His movements were precise, controlled. Each thrust was an answer, not an outburst. Still, blood streaked his armor. A Harpy fell at his feet, golden mask rolling away to reveal a young face twisted in surprise. Missandei stood behind the shields, her hands clenched, her mouth tight. When a masked man broke through for a heartbeat, she flinched, and a cloaked woman yanked her back with a hissed curse. Daenerys' horse shied as a screaming man stumbled into the light, clutching his belly. The freedman's fingers were slick, trying to hold his insides in. His eyes found Daenerys and went wide with a child's hope. He collapsed before he could speak. Something inside her snapped, not into madness, but into cold. "Hold," she ordered the Unsullied, her voice carrying over the clash of metal. "Do not chase into the dark. Keep them here." Tyrion looked at her sharply. "If we don't pursue, they escape. If we pursue," Daenerys said, "they lead us into crowds. They want us to kill the wrong people." Ser Barristan drew his sword with the slow certainty of a man who had done it 1,000 times. "Then we do it properly," he said. Daenerys dismounted and stepped into the lane, forcing herself into the space where fear lived. The masks turned toward her as if drawn by scent. For a moment, even the Harpies hesitated. The Queen's presence was a kind of weight. "You wanted my attention," Daenerys called, her voice echoing off brick. "You have it." A masked man lunged, faster than thought. Ser Barristan moved, blade flashing, and the attacker fell with a gurgle. Another ha! RPY leapt from a doorway, dagger aimed for Daenerys' ribs. Grey Worm's spear took him in the throat, pinning him to the wall. Blood sprayed and ran down brick like paint. Daenerys did not flinch. She stared at the remaining masks. "You hide behind your city," she said. "You hide behind your people. But you are not the city. You are rot." A laugh came from the shadows, high, bitter. "You burn ships," a voice called in Valyrian, thick with accent. "You burn camps. You think you are merciful. You are still fire." Daenerys' eyes searched the dark, but the voice could have been anywhere. "Yes," she said, "I am fire, and I am restraint. You will learn both." The Harpies struck again, but the Unsullied held, refusing the bait. The lane became a killing ground of controlled movement. Shields shifting, spears thrusting, swords cutting. When a masked man tried to flee, an Unsullied stepped forward and brought him down with a spear through the thigh. Daenerys watched, cataloging. They were learning her rules, and the rules were saving lives. When the last mask fell, the lane stank of blood and lamp oil. The freedman huddled tighter, sobbing. Grey Worm wiped his blade on his own cloak with grim efficiency. Daenerys looked at the golden masks scattered across the stones. "They will keep doing this," she said quietly. Tyrion's voice was low. "Because you won where they thought you would lose yourself." Daenerys stared down at the dead men. Sons of old families, perhaps, men who had eaten at tables built on slavery. "Then we choke the rot," she said. "Not with fire." Ser Barristan met her gaze. "With justice," he said. Daenerys nodded once. "With certainty," she replied, "and with fear that has a name." The throne hall of the Great Pyramid had been designed to make men feel small. The old masters had understood power's simplest trick, elevation. Now Daenerys sat on their stolen height, a queen in a chair that did not quite fit her, wearing a crown that was more burden than ornament. Torches blazed along the walls, turning the carved brick into shifting gold. The air was hot with bodies and tension. Nobles in fine togas stood in clusters, their faces carefully blank, their eyes sharp with calculation. Freedmen filled the back of the hall, watching with the ferocity of those who had learned that justice could be delayed forever. At the center, shackled and unmasked, knelt a young man with blood crusted at his hairline. Without his golden face, he looked ordinary. That was what made him frightening. Missandei read from a scroll in a clear voice. Names of the dead, names of streets, names of the attacks. Each name fell into the hall like a stone into water, sending ripples of anger through the crowd. The young man kept his head lowered until Missandei spoke the name of a child who had been stabbed while carrying bread. Then his shoulders twitched. He swallowed. Daenerys leaned forward. "Look at me," she ordered. Slowly, the young man lifted his face. His eyes were dark, stubborn. Mysa, someone whispered from the back. Mocking or pleading, Daenerys could not tell. You call yourself a son of Meereen, Daenerys said, her voice even. You call yourself a savior. You murder the people you claim to protect. His lips curled. You are a foreign queen, he spat. A conqueror with monsters. You pretend to be merciful so the slaves will love you. But you are still a dragon. Dragons do not rule. They burn. Tyrion's hand shifted slightly on the arm of his chair. Grey Worm's posture tightened. Ser Barristan's eyes narrowed. Daenerys felt the hall watching her, waiting for the obvious cruelty, waiting for the dragon to prove itself. She stood. The movement drew a hush like a drawn blade. Daenerys stepped down from the dais and walked across the hall until she stood before the kneeling man. She could smell him, fear under sweat, blood under fear. You want me to burn you, she said softly, so softly that he had to lean forward to hear. You want me to become the monster you have promised everyone. He stared up at her, defiant. Daenerys turned and faced the nobles. The sons of the Harpy hide among you, she said, voice rising. They dine at your tables, sleep in your beds, wear your perfumes. They stab in the dark and call it honor. The nobles' faces did not change, but Daenerys saw the flicker in their eyes. Some were afraid, some were angry, some were pleased, as if violence were merely a game of shifting pieces. Daenerys returned her gaze to the kneeling man. You will not die by dragonfire, she said. A murmur swept the hall. Surprise, confusion, even disappointment. The young man's eyes widened despite himself. Daenerys lifted her hand. Grey Worm stepped forward, holding iron chains. You will be taken to the cells beneath this pyramid, Daenerys continued. You will be questioned. You will give names. If you do, you will live long enough to see Meereen change. If you do not, she paused, letting the silence tighten like a noose. If you do not, you will be hanged. Not burned. Hanged, as any murderer is hanged. The young man's defiance cracked. Just a hair. You think that makes you better? He whispered. Daenerys bent slightly, meeting his eyes. It makes me controlled, she replied. And that is what should terrify you. She straightened and spoke to the hall as if carving her words into brick. I will not punish Meereen for the crimes of cowards. I will punish cowards for the crimes they commit. And I will do it the same way every time, until you learn that there is no shadow deep enough to hide you. She returned to the dais and sat again, feeling the weight of the throne beneath her. Tyrion watched her with a look that was not quite admiration and not quite caution. When the shackled man was dragged away, the nobles filed out like a tide retreating, leaving the freedmen behind, staring at Daenerys as if trying to decide whether restraint could be trusted. Daenerys held their gaze without blinking. Outside, somewhere high above, Drogon's wings beat once, and dust drifted from the ceiling like ash that had not yet fallen. Later, when the hall was empty and the torches had burned down to sullen coals, Daenerys climbed to the rooftop garden. The old masters had planted it as a display of wealth, rare flowers, small trees in ceramic pots, trickling fountains fed by stolen water. Now the garden belonged to the night wind and the queen who could not sleep. Raven cages lined one wall, black shapes shifting inside. Their fluttering sounded like paper tearing. Scrolls lay on a stone table, sealed with red wax stamped in the shape of a three-headed dragon. Tyrion sat on the low edge of a fountain, legs dangling, looking for all the world like a boy who had wandered into a place he did not deserve. Missandei stood near the scrolls, fingers resting lightly on the seals as if touching them could make the words inside kinder. Daenerys stared out over Meereen. Lanterns dotted the streets like cautious stars. In the distance beyond the walls, the smoldering remains of camps still glowed faintly, a reminder that fire had been used and could be used again. Ser Barristan stood at the garden's edge, watching the horizon as if he expected an army to appear out of darkness. Grey Worm's voice carried up from below, clipped commands as the Unsullied drilled even at night. Discipline did not sleep. Tyrion broke the silence first. Those letters, he said, nodding toward the scrolls. Are you declaring war on every slaver city with a quill? Daenerys turned slowly. I am declaring truth, she replied. I am telling them what will happen if they bring chains to my shores. Missandei's voice was soft. And telling Westeros too? Daenerys hesitated. Westeros was a word that lived in her like a ghost. A land of stone castles and cold seas, of a home she had never known except through stories and hunger. Yes, she said. The Seven Kingdoms have heard only rumors. Mad King's daughter, foreign queen, dragons that burn children. Tyrion's mouth tightened. Some of those rumors were very carefully fed. I know, Daenerys said. That is why these ravens fly. She reached for one of the scrolls and traced the wax seal with her thumb. I will not arrive as a storm that destroys everything, she said. I will arrive as a blade aimed at those who raise armies against me. Tyrion studied her, his expression unreadable. That will make it harder, he said at last. Daenerys looked at him sharply. Harder to win? Harder to win quickly, Tyrion corrected. Fear is a door that opens fast. Respect is a door you have to build. Missandei smiled faintly. Then she will build it. Daenerys felt a strange warmth at that, a warmth that was not dragonfire. She looked down at the city again. Somewhere below, a mother would be telling a child that the Dragon Queen had not burned their home. Somewhere beyond the walls, a slaver commander would be staring at ashes and realizing the world had changed. I need them to understand something, Daenerys said quietly. If I burn cities, every man with AS word will fight to the last because surrender means nothing. If I burn armies, surrender becomes survival. It becomes possible. Tyrion's gaze lifted to the raven cages. You're trying to make surrender more attractive than defiance. Yes, Daenerys said. I am trying to make peace possible without becoming a monster. Tyrion laughed once, sharp and humorless. A noble ambition. Most rulers are satisfied with being monsters as long as the songs call them great. Daenerys held his gaze. Will they call me great if I do this? Tyrion's eyes flicked away, toward the dark horizon. They will call you many things, he said. Great will be one of them. Mad will be another. The trick is ensuring the realm survives long enough to argue. Daenerys nodded, accepting the ugliness of it. She lifted the first scroll and handed it to Missandei. Send them, she said. Missandei carried it to the cages, her movements gentle. The ravens inside shifted, sensing freedom. Daenerys watched the seals lined up like small red wounds on stone. Each letter was a promise. Each promise was a weight. Behind her, Ser Barristan's voice came, low. Your Grace, he said. The world will test you. They will try to force you into your father's shape. Daenerys did not turn. Then I will break their hands, she said, before they can mold me. The sea smelled different when it was not a prison. It smelled like distance and possibility, like salt that could not be owned. As Meereen's harbor receded, the city became a shape of brick and memory under a pale morning sky. Daenerys stood on the deck of her flagship and watched the coastline shrink. The wind tugged at the braids in her hair, pulling loose strands that brushed her cheeks. Red ribbons threaded through the braids fluttered like small banners, stubborn against the vast blue. Tyrion leaned against the rail nearby, maps weighed down by a stone so they would not be stolen by wind. He looked out at the horizon as if trying to find a joke in it and failing. Missandei stood with both hands on the ship's rail, eyes fixed on the water. There was sadness in her posture, but also relief. Meereen had been a battlefield even when it pretended to be a city. Leaving it felt like letting out a breath she had held for too long. Grey worms stood with the unsullied in ordered ranks, their discipline unbroken by the sway of the ship. They were soldiers born in chains, now marching toward a war that promised crowns and corpses. Grey Worm's face was calm, but Daenerys knew there was something fierce beneath it. Loyalty carved by choice, not training. Ser Barristan Selmy stood at the prow, white cloak snapping behind him. He watched the open sea with the same attention he had once given tourney fields. The old knight looked like a man who had stepped into a tale he had not expected to live. On a nearby ship, Daario Naharis leaned against the mast with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He looked at Daenerys as if she were both queen and storm. His presence was comfort and complication, a reminder that desire did not vanish just because duty grew heavier. Above, 3 shadows moved across the fleet. Drogon flew highest, black against blue, his wings beating slow and sure. Rhaegal and Viserion circled lower, their paths deliberate. Daenerys had insisted on it. Controlled patterns, distance from sails, no swooping low enough to panic men. Even now, even here, she trained them. As the fleet cut through the water, Daenerys felt something inside her loosen and tighten at once. Meereen was behind her, but it was not gone. The city lived in her choices, in the rules she had written with fire and restraint. Tyrion spoke without looking at her. "You're really doing it," he said, "sailing toward a continent that has spent years killing itself and will probably unite just long enough to hate you." Daenerys watched the waves roll, endless and indifferent. "They will hate me," she said. "They will fear me, but they will not be able to say I came to burn their children." Tyrion's mouth quirked. "Some will say it anyway. Then I will give them a different story to repeat," Daenerys replied. "One they cannot ignore." Missandei turned slightly. "What story?" Daenerys lifted her chin toward the dragons, toward the vast horizon that held Westeros like a prow. "Mice and a threat. That dragons do not have to mean ashes," she said. "That power can be aimed. That a queen can win without becoming a nightmare." Grey Worm's voice came, steady. "The enemy will not understand." "They will," Daenerys said, "when their armies burn in open fields, when their castles surrender without their cities screaming, when they realize the only safe place is beneath my peace." Ser Barristan's gaze returned to her, and in it she saw a reflection of the girl she had been. Hungry, frightened, determined, and the woman she was becoming. "Then you must hold to it," he said, "even when it costs you." Daenerys' hands tightened on the rail. She could feel the wood under her palms, the vibration of the ship's movement, the steady insistence of forward motion. "I will," she said, and the words were not a hope but a vow. Drogon cried above them, a sound that made gulls scatter and sailors glance up despite themselves. The dragons wheeled and returned to their pattern, obedient to a rule that had never existed before her. Meereen dwindled into a smear of red brick on the horizon. Ahead, the sea opened like a road, and Daenerys Targaryen stood at its edge, carrying fire like a sword she intended to wield with precision. The sea grew colder the nearer they sailed to Westeros, as if the water itself remembered winters and wanted to teach her. The wind came off the waves with teeth. It tugged at cloaks, stung eyes, salted lips until every breath tasted like iron. Daenerys stood at the prow and let it batter her, because softness had never kept anyone alive. Dragonstone emerged from fog like a thought made stone. Black cliffs thrust up from the gray, sharp as broken glass. The castle sat above them, not graceful like the palaces of Essos, but squat and ancient, a thing built to endure weather and war. Even at this distance she could see the great gate carved with dragons, mouths open in frozen roar, as if the rock itself remembered her name. A strange tightness moved through her chest. Home, the word whispered, though she had no memory of this place beyond stories told in cramped rooms while her brother paced like a hungry wolf. She had been born here, they said, in the midst of a storm so fierce it had torn ships apart in the bay. She had taken her first breath to thunder and salt. Perhaps that was why the cold wind now felt like an old hand on her shoulder. Tyrion Lannister watched her face as if reading it were a matter of survival. "Not as welcoming as Meereen," he said. "It does not need to be," Daenerys replied. "It needs to hold." Missandei leaned in close, her voice nearly lost to the wind. "Do you feel it, Mysa?" Daenerys did. Beneath the wind and waves, beneath the creak of timber and the murmured prayers of sailors, there was a deeper pulse. The island smelled of smoke that had never entirely gone away, of old heat trapped in rock. Dragonstone's bones were volcanic. Even the cold could not erase that. Grey Worm stood behind them, his gaze fixed on the shoreline where small figures had begun to gather, fisherfolk, perhaps, and the first of her scouts. The Unsullied were silent, but their silence was a weight. They were an army carried across the world by her promise. Ser Barristan Selmy's white cloak snapped like a banner. His eyes did not soften at the sight of Dragonstone. They sharpened. "This place," he murmured, "was the Targaryens' last hold when Aegon began his conquest. It is where dragons first tasted Westerosi air." Daenerys looked up at the sky. Drogon cut through the mist like a black arrow, wings beating slow and deliberate. Rhaegal and Viserion kept their pattern, as trained, not swooping low to frighten the men on deck. The discipline made her chest ache with pride and dread both. If she could teach dragons restraint, then perhaps she could teach herself. The ships swung toward the bay. Waves slapped the hull in heavy, cold hands. As they neared shore, Daenerys saw the black sand, the volcanic rock, the seaweed strewn like torn cloth. There were no bright harbors here, no spices on the air, no perfumes. Only salt, smoke, and the old, hard smell of a land that did not forgive. A narrow landing had been prepared. Men in rough cloaks, weighted with spears and wary eyes, banners snapping. Her dragon banner, red on black, the cloth vivid against the bleak stone. As the gangplank thumped down, Daenerys stood still for a heartbeat, letting the moment press itself into her bones. This was the edge of the Seven Kingdoms. This was the place her family had retreated to when the world turned against them. This was where a child had been born while kings died elsewhere. She stepped forward. Her boot met black sand, and the cold bit through leather. The wind seized her hair. The shore smelled of wet stone and distant smoke. For the first time since she had been a girl running through foreign streets, Daenerys Targaryen stood on Westerosi ground, and the island did not bow, simply waited. Dragonstone's halls were carved from the island itself, corridors of black stone that swallowed sound and returned it as echo. Torches burned in iron brackets, their flame reflected in wet-looking rock as if the castle were perpetually sweating. The air was colder inside than out, and it carried the faint sulfur tang of old fire. Daenerys descended into the map room with her council behind her, boots clicking on stone worn smooth by centuries of feet that had marched to war and returned to count losses. The painted table filled the chamber like a land made captive. Westeros lay beneath her hands in carved wood, mountains raised, rivers cut, the coastline rough and jagged. Candlelight made the seas shimmer. Tyrion moved around the table with the restlessness of a man who could not help but scheme. Scrolls and reports lay piled like weapons. Ser Barristan stood near the table's edge, composed as if in a throne room instead of a war chamber, though his eyes tracked every face. Olenna Tyrell sat in a high-backed chair as though it belonged to her by birthright. Age had not diminished her, it had sharpened her into something dangerous. She watched Daenerys with open appraisal, neither fearing dragons nor pretending she did not. Yara Greyjoy stood with hands braced on her hips, hair braided tight, jaw set like a blade. Sea salt clung to her leathers. She looked like the storm she had been born in. Ellaria Sand leaned in the shadow near a brazier, her eyes dark, her expression unreadable. The two sand snakes flanking her were tense as drawn bows, hands near dagger hilts, their silence loud. Missandei held sealed raven letters close to her chest as if they might fly away if she loosened her grip. Grey Worm remained at the door, unsullied guards behind him, his gaze sweeping the room as though expecting treachery to crawl out of stone. Daenerys stepped to the painted table and placed her hands on Westeros. The carved land felt smooth and cold, unmoved by her touch. "You have come at last," Olenna Tyrell said, her voice dry. "I was beginning to think you might decide to conquer the world and forget the kingdom you claim." Daenerys did not rise to it. "I did not cross a sea to trade barbs," she replied. "I crossed to end a war and claim what was stolen." Yara Greyjoy snorted softly. "Stolen? Funny word from someone arriving with an army. Tyrion's mouth twitched. We can call it reclaimed if it soothes the conscience. Conscience, Olenna said, as if tasting something unpleasant. My dear dwarf, conscience is a luxury the dead do not enjoy. Daenerys felt the eyes on her, weighing, measuring. They wanted to know what kind of dragon queen had landed on their rock. They wanted to know whether she would burn them all the moment they displeased her. She let the silence stretch because silence was sometimes the first proof of restraint. Then she spoke, voice steady enough that it did not need to be loud. I did not come to burn your cities, Dean. Ares said. I did not come to turn kings landing into ash to sit on a throne of rubble. Ellaria Sand's gaze sharpened. Yara's brows rose. Even Olenna's mouth paused mid-sneer. Tyrion watched Daenerys closely, as if listening for a crack in her resolve. Daenerys continued, pressing her fingers into the carved wood. My dragons will be used against armies in the field, against fleets that carry war, against siege engines and supply lines. The people of Westeros have suffered enough from kings who call themselves saviors while they starve the small folk. I will not add dragonfire to that suffering. Olenna's laugh was low and incredulous. How noble! It is not nobility, Daenerys said. It is strategy. Yara leaned forward. Strategy that gives your enemies a place to hide. Ser Barristan's voice came calm as a blade being drawn. A place to hide is not safety if you can cut the roads and burn the armies. Ellaria's tone was soft, dangerous. Cersei Lannister will put children on her walls if she thinks it will stop your fire. Daenerys met her gaze. Then I will not burn the walls, she said. I will burn the army that feeds them, the soldiers that defend them, and the ships that bring them food. A city cannot hold forever if its queen cannot protect it. Tyrion nodded faintly, as if approving the shape of the thought even while fearing its cost. A siege without slaughter, he murmured. If the realm lets it happen. Olenna leaned back, eyes narrowing. And if the realm does not? She asked. If they refuse to surrender, if they spit on your mercy, if they call you weak? Daenerys held the old woman's gaze until the room felt smaller. Then they will learn that restraint is not softness, she said. They will learn it in open fields, where there are no children to hide behind. For the first time since she entered, Olenna Tyrell's smile was genuine. It was not warm. It was appreciative in the way a predator appreciates a rival. Very well, she said. Let us see if your discipline survives Westeros. Dragonstone did not greet them with cheering crowds. It gave them wind and stone and the stare of strangers who had learned to distrust anyone with a claim. The first days were work. Unloading supplies, setting patrols, mapping hidden paths through the island's rocks, turning an ancient fortress into a living seat of war. Daenerys walked the black sand beach with Tyrion and Missandei, the sea hissing at their feet. The sand looked like ground-down obsidian, glittering when the sun broke through clouds for a heartbeat. Seaweed lay in thick, dark ropes. The air was raw enough to make lungs sting. Behind them, Grey Worm moved with the Unsullied through stacks of crates, grain, salted meat, weapons hauled across the sea. The Unsullied did not complain. They simply lifted and carried as if labor were a continuation of battle. Dothraki riders watched from a line nearer the cliffs, horses uneasy on black sand. The Khalasar had crossed the narrow sea like a miracle, but the riders still looked at the gray water with suspicion. The sea was not a thing you could ride down. It was not a thing you could kill. Ser Barristan spoke quietly with Westerosi scouts, men in rough cloaks who had come with news and caution. Their accents were sharp, their eyes wary. They glanced at Daenerys as if expecting her to breathe fire. You are certain the lords will not rise at once? Daenerys asked one of them. The man swallowed. Some will, your grace, he said. Some will watch. Many fear the dragons. They fear what dragons did, Tyrion corrected, voice dry. Not what dragons are. Daenerys turned her gaze out across the water. News travels, she said. They will have heard of Meereen. They have heard, the scout admitted. They say you burned slaver armies and spared cities. They say you hanged killers instead of feeding them to dragons. They say you are not what the Lannisters call you. Missandei's eyes brightened. Daenerys felt a faint easing in her chest. Words were not swords, but they could cut. Tyrion watched her face. Rumor is a fickle ally, he warned. Today they call you disciplined. Tomorrow they call you mad. All it takes is one frightened lord with a loud voice. Daenerys glanced up toward the cliffs. Drogon perched on a stone outcrop like a living shadow, wings tucked, tail curled. He watched the beach with the stillness of a predator deciding whether prey mattered. Above the waves, Rhaegal and Viserion glided in wide arcs, their movement measured, training even in flight. One frightened lord, Daenerys murmured, is why I will not give them what they expect. Missandei stepped closer, voice soft but firm. They will try to force you. Daenerys nodded. I know. They continued along the beach, past a line of fishermen from the nearby village who had come to stare at the foreign army. Their faces were weathered, their hands raw. They kept a distance, eyes fixed on the unsullied spears. The Dothrakis curved rocks. The queen's pale hair that marked her as other. A child broke from the line and ran closer, small boots thudding on sand. His mother hissed and reached for him, too late. The boy stopped a few paces from Daenerys and stared up at her, eyes wide. Are you the dragon lady? He asked, the words rough and fearless. Daenerys crouched, lowering herself to his level. The boy did not flinch. His cheeks were red from cold. There was salt crusted in the corner of his mouth. I am Daenerys Targaryen, she said. And yes, I have dragons. The boy's eyes flicked toward the cliffs. Will you burn us? The question struck harder than any insult. Daenerys felt Tyrion's gaze on her, felt Missandei's breath still. Around them, the fishermen held themselves rigid, pretending not to listen while listening to everything. Daenerys reached out and gently touched the boy's shoulder, feeling the thinness beneath his rough wool. No, she said. Not you. Never you. The boy blinked, processing. Then who? Daenerys looked out toward the sea, toward the horizon where King's Landing lay unseen, toward armies she had not yet met. Those who come with chains, she said. Those who come to hurt you. Those who think your life is theirs to spend. The boy nodded as if that made perfect sense. Then he ran back to his mother, who hugged him tight, eyes still fixed on Daenerys with the fear of a woman who had seen too many promises break. Daenerys rose slowly. Tyrion spoke quietly beside her. That, he said, is the war you're actually fighting. Daenerys watched the fishermen retreat, watched Grey Worm's unsullied march past like a river of bronze. Then we win it, she replied, without burning the world to do it. The first blood in Westeros did not come with trumpets. It came with a handful of men riding too close to Dragonstone's reach, convinced their red cloaks made them invisible. They were scouts, Lannister men, Tyrion said, sent to measure the island's defenses and report back with numbers and fear. They rode along the coastal road on the mainland opposite the bay, small as ants from the cliffs, but close enough to taste in Daenerys' mind like an insult. She did not want to begin with slaughter. She wanted to begin with a lesson. Drogon carried her above the headland, his wings cutting the damp air. The cliffs below were jagged, slick with spray. The land smelled of wet grass and cold earth. It was not Essos. The colors were muted, the sky heavy with cloud. Below, the scouts moved in a line, red cloaks flapping, helmets glinting when a stray shard of sunlight pierced the gray. They stopped near a rise and looked out toward the sea, toward Dragonstone, pointing. One lifted a horn to his lips. Daenerys tightened her knees. Drogon angled down, silent as falling night until he wasn't. His roar hit the road like a hammer. The horses screamed and reared, hooves scrabbling. Men shouted, scrambling for spears, for crossbows, for any sense of control. Daenerys did not let Drogon loose. She held him in the air, close enough that the heat from his body rolled over the road, close enough that the men below could see her face, could see pale hair whipping in the wind like a flag. Drop your weapons, she called, her voice carried by the cliff's echo and Drogon's looming threat. Some did immediately, hands shaking. One man, braver or more foolish, raised his crossbow and aimed upward with trembling arms. Daenerys pointed at him, not with fury but with cold clarity. "That one?" she murmured to Drogon, and felt the dragon's body tense, the fire ready. She could have burned him to ash in an instant. She could have made the first Westerosi sight of dragons be a man screaming. Instead, she lifted her hand sharply. "No," she told Drogon, and the dragon's chest shuddered as he swallowed flame. Smoke curled from his nostrils in irritated coils. The crossbowman stared up, confused, then, slowly, lowered the weapon and let it fall into the dirt. Daenerys breathed out. Restraint was not an absence of violence. It was violence held back with both hands. On the cliff above, Tyrion watched through a spyglass, his posture tense. Missandei stood beside him, her cloak pulled tight, her gaze fixed on Daenerys with the worry of someone who understood how thin the line was. Grey Worm led a small, unsullied detachment through low grass toward the road, their movement swift and silent. Ser Barristan rode behind them, sword at his hip, expression grim. When the Unsullied reached the scouts, they did not kill. They disarmed, bound hands, and pulled the men from their horses. The scouts protested, cursed, begged. Grey Worm said nothing. His silence was more frightening than threats. Daenerys landed Drogon on the rise above the road, the dragon's claws biting into damp earth. She slid down and walked toward the bound men, her boots sinking slightly into mud. Their leader, a man with a trimmed beard and eyes too proud, spat near her feet. "You think you can frighten us into kneeling," he snarled. "You're not our queen." Daenerys looked at the spittle, then at him. "No," she said, "not yet." She turned to Grey Worm. "Bring them to Dragonstone," she ordered. "Feed them, let them sleep, then send them back." Tyrion's voice, faint from the cliff, carried down in disbelief. "Send them back." Daenerys met his gaze above, her expression hard. "They will tell Cersei Lannister what they saw," she said. "They will tell her I could have burned them and did not. They will tell her that if she wants war, she will have to meet me in the open." She looked back at the bound men. "Go home," she told them. "Tell your queen, I burn armies, not children. If she hides behind her people, I will strip her shields away." The scouts stared at her as if unsure whether mercy was real or merely another trap. Daenerys let them wonder. Wonder was useful. As Drogon lifted again into the gray sky, Daenerys felt the first Westerosi lesson settle into place like a stone. Fear had been delivered, so had restraint. The story would travel faster than ravens. The sea gave and the sea took, and it never cared which. The day the Iron Fleet came, fog rolled in thick enough to swallow ships whole. The horizon vanished. Sound carried strangely, distant creaks, faint shouts, the low groan of waves. Felt like sailing through a mouth. Yara Greyjoy's ships had gone out to meet a supply convoy, swift and confident, cutting through mist with the ease of those born to water. When the first screams reached Dragonstone, they were thin, wind-torn, and wrong. Daenerys was on the cliffs when the fog thinned for a heartbeat and revealed black sails, dozens of them, appearing as if conjured from smoke. The Iron Fleet surged forward, ships packed tight, moving like a spear thrust. At their head, a warship with a prow carved into a snarling beast cut the waves, and on its forecastle stood a man in dark armor with a grin that looked like hunger.
Euron Greyjoy.
Even from this distance, his arrogance was visible. It shone like oil. Horns blared. From Dragonstone's batteries, men scrambled to man ballistae and catapults. Tyrion shouted orders, his voice raw. "Signal the fleet back. Pull them toward shore." Yara's ships turned, oars digging, but the Iron Fleet was faster than it had any right to be. Grappling hooks flew. The sound of iron biting would carried across the water like teeth. Daenerys did not hesitate. She ran to Drogon, already perched on the cliff like a black statue, and climbed. The dragon launched into fog with a roar that made the very air tremble. As they broke above the mist, the battle unfolded beneath like a brutal tapestry. Ironborn ships rammed, hooked, and boarded with savage joy. Men screamed, fell into cold water, vanished. Arrows streaked between decks. Firepots shattered and spread flame across rigging. Yara Greyjoy stood on her deck with an axe in hand, hair whipping, face set in furious determination. Theon Greyjoy fought near her, bow bending, eyes wild. He moved like a man desperate to prove he was not a coward. And there, on the leading warship, Euron Greyjoy laughed, head thrown back, as if the battle were a feast laid out for him. Daenerys felt Drogon's fire rising in his chest like a storm. She could end this by burning every ship into the sea. She could turn the fog into a wall of smoke and ash. But there were her ships tangled with theirs. There were her men on those decks. There were sailors in the water thrashing too close to the ships, too close to flame. "Higher!" she commanded, and Drogon climbed, wings beating hard. The cold air stung her eyes. She forced herself to see not the enemy as a mass, but as shapes, targets, distances, gaps. "Out," she whispered, and guided Drogon away from the knot of fighting toward the edge of the battle where Iron Fleet ships were still closing in, not yet tangled with her allies. Rhaegal and Viserion appeared through the fog, circling, waiting for her will. Daenerys pointed toward a cluster of Iron Fleet ships still free of entanglement. "Those," she said. "Drogon dove." The sea rushed up. The black sails grew large. Men on deck looked up, faces twisting from triumph to fear. Dragonfire erupted, scorching across the nearest ship's rigging, climbing the mast like a living thing. Sailcloth ignited, ropes snapped, burning. Men leapt, screaming, into the water. Daenerys pulled Drogon up fast, not lingering. She refused to let fire wander. Rhaegal's green flame lanced across a second ship, ripping through its oars, turning the crew's shouted curses into shrieks. Viserion swept low over a third, his pale fire turning the deck into a furnace. The burning ships, far from shore and far from her own entangled fleet, began to break formation. The Iron Fleet's spear point blunted. Their momentum faltered. Euron Greyjoy saw it. Even through fog and distance, Daenerys felt his attention like a hook. His head turned toward Dragonstone's cliffs, toward her, toward the dragons, and his grin widened as if delighting in the danger. He signaled, and scorpions on his flagship's deck swung upward. Massive bolts launched, cutting through mist. One bolt tore past Drogon's wing close enough that Daenerys felt the wind of it, felt Drogon's muscle twitch in sudden anger. Another bolt slammed into the sea with a violent splash. A third struck Yara's ship. Wood exploded, men screamed, and the deck lurched. Daenerys' breath caught. "No," she whispered, and drove Drogon lower, toward the flagship. But the knot of fighting was too dense. Her ships and Euron's were tangled like beasts locked in a death embrace. If she burned now, she would burn her own. Rage tasted like copper on her tongue. She forced herself to swallow it. "Pull back," she screamed, not sure who could hear. "Get clear." Yara's ship bucked as Theon dragged men away from flame. The fog swallowed screams and returned them as ghosts. The Iron Fleet pressed, hungry, and Daenerys struck where she could, burning the ships still outside the knot, cutting off reinforcements, forcing Euron's line to fracture. It was not enough to make the battle clean. Nothing at sea ever was. When the fog finally began to thin, the water was littered with broken planks, floating bodies, and men clinging to debris with numb hands. Euron Greyjoy's flagship, still locked with Yara's, began to pull away, dragging prizes. He withdrew not because he feared her fire, but because he had taken what he wanted. Daenerys watched him vanish into mist with a fury so cold it felt like ice. The sea did not give back easily. It only swallowed and moved on. Dragonstone's courtyard filled with survivors and silence. Men stumbled through the gate wrapped in wet cloaks, faces gray with cold, hands shaking as they clutched wounds. Some were carried on doors ripped from their hinges. Some walked with the strange calm of those who had already decided they were dead and were simply waiting for the world to agree. Missandei moved among them with blankets and water, her hands gentle, her face tight with grief. Grey Worm directed Unsullied to lift the wounded, to stack weapons, to move the living away from the dead with the efficiency of a man who could not afford to stop and feel. Yara Greyjoy strode into the courtyard like a storm made flesh, soaked, blood streaked along her jaw where someone else's pain had splashed. Her axe rested on her shoulder as if it were part of her. Her eyes were furious and hollow at once. Daenerys met her at the center of the stone, the cold air biting through her own cloak. She could smell the sea on Yara, could smell smoke and blood. Behind Daenerys, Tyrion stood with salt crusted on his cloak, his face drawn. Ser Barristan watched from the edge, his gaze on the pile of broken scorpion bolts collected like trophies of failure. Yara stopped close enough that Daenerys could see the tremor in her hands. "He took them," Yara said, voice rough. "He took my ships, my men, and he took..." Her throat tightened. "He took the women." Ellaria Sand and the Sand Snakes had been out there. Their ships had been part of the tangle. Daenerys had seen fire, heard screams, watched Euron's flagship pull away like a wolf dragging a carcass into fog. Daenerys felt guilt twist in her gut, sharp as a knife. She had not burned the knot. She had not turned the sea into ash. She had held back, and Euron Greyjoy had used that restraint like a weapon. Yara's eyes searched Daenerys' face, daring her to say it had been worth it. "Why didn't you burn them?" she demanded. "Why didn't you burn him?" Tyrion shifted as if to speak, but Daenerys raised a hand, stopping him. This was hers. "I could not," Daenerys said. The words tasted like ash. "Not without burning you too. Not without burning my own ships and my own men." Yara laughed, bitter. "So we bleed because you have rules." Daenerys held her gaze, refusing to flinch. "Yes," she said. "And you live because of them." Yara's mouth tightened. "Tell that to the ones in chains." Daenerys felt the courtyard watching, the Unsullied carrying bodies, the shivering sailors, the villagers who had come to stare and now looked away as if ashamed. Tyrion's eyes were on Daenerys, warning and understanding warring in them. Daenerys stepped closer to Yara until the space between them was warm with anger. "Euron Greyjoy thinks I will break," she said quietly. "He thinks he can bait me into burning the wrong people. He will learn he cannot." Yara's jaw clenched. "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime," Daenerys said, voice hardening, "we hunt him."
Ser Barris.
Tan's voice came low, steady. "A predator that believes himself untouchable becomes careless." Tyrion nodded reluctantly. "He wants you furious. He wants you to chase him into a situation where you have to choose between restraint and victory." Daenerys looked at the broken scorpion bolts on the ground, thick iron shafts that had nearly torn Drogon's wing. She pictured Euron's grin. She pictured women dragged away screaming into fog. The anger in her chest wanted to be fire. She forced it to be steel. "We will not fight him where he wants," Daenerys said. "We will fight him where he cannot hide behind captives, where he cannot tangle ships and dare me to burn my own." Yara's eyes narrowed. "And where is that?" Daenerys turned toward the sea, toward the distant smoke where burned ships still smoldered. "In open water," she said, "with dragons above and no one beneath them but enemies." Yara stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharp. "Good," she said, "because if you don't kill him, I will." Daenerys met her gaze and felt something settle, an agreement forged in grief. "Then we do it together," she replied. And in the cold courtyard of Dragonstone, surrounded by survivors and salt and the quiet horror of chains returned, Daenerys Targaryen promised herself that restraint would not mean surrender. A week after the sea battle, when Dragonstone still smelled faintly of smoke and grief, another ship approached through calmer water. It flew no proud banner, only the plain cloth of a vessel that had been patched and sailed too hard. It came without fanfare, as if afraid to announce itself in a world that punished hope. Daenerys stood on the stone steps above the dock as the ship eased in. Missandei was beside her, hands clasped, expression composed. Tyrion stood one step behind, his body angled as if ready to intervene with words. Ser Barristan's presence was a quiet wall at Daenerys' other shoulder. Grey Worm and unsullied guards lined the path like a corridor of bronze. Above, Drogon perched on the castle wall, black against the sky, head lowered, watching the dock with the intense stillness of a predator. The shadow he cast made sailors glance up and swallow. When the gangplank fell, a man stepped onto Dragonstone stones wearing dark furs and a sword at his hip. He moved like someone who had learned caution by being punished for trust. His hair was dark, his face solemn, his eyes the gray of northern skies. Behind him came a shorter man with a weathered face and kind eyes, Davos Seaworth, followed by a handful of northerners who looked as if they had never belonged anywhere but snow. Jon Snow stopped at the base of the steps and looked up at Daenerys. His gaze took in her pale hair, her steady posture, the soldiers flanking her, and the shadow of a dragon above. He did not bow. He did not swagger. He simply stood as if bracing himself against a storm. Davos cleared his throat. "Your Grace," he said, voice respectful but not servile. Jon Snow, King in the North. The title hung in the air like a challenge. Tyrion's mouth twitched. Daenerys could almost hear the thoughts behind his eyes. Kings were a problem. Kings were men who did not like kneeling. Daenerys descended a few steps, stopping before she was level with Jon Snow, forcing him to look up just slightly. It was a small assertion. Small assertions mattered. "Jon Snow," she said, "you have sailed far to stand on my rock." Jon Snow's gaze did not waver. "I came because we need you," he said plainly. There was no flattery in him, no attempt to soften truth. The bluntness was strangely refreshing after so many courts and careful lies. Daenerys felt a flicker of irritation. "Many come because they need me," she replied. "Few come because they offer something in return." Jon Snow's jaw tightened. "I didn't come to bargain," he said. "I came to warn you." The wind shifted. Drogon's low rumble rolled over the stones, a sound like distant thunder. One of the northerners flinched. Davos kept his eyes on Daenerys, as if trying to judge whether she would burn them for insolence. Daenerys kept her face still. "Warn me of what?" she asked. Jon Snow's eyes hardened, as if he were looking past her, past the castle, into something darker. "The dead are coming," he said. "Not dead men in graves. Not stories. An army that doesn't tire, doesn't starve, doesn't fear dragons. An army that will take every city, every village, every child. It will leave nothing but silence." The courtyard behind Daenerys seemed to tighten. Missandei's breath caught. Tyrion's expression shifted from amusement to something wary. Ser Barristan's eyes narrowed, not in disbelief, but in sudden attention. Daenerys had heard wild tales before. Dothraki ghosts, Carthene warlocks, gods in temples, monsters in the dark. She had learned that the world was larger than reason wanted it to be. Still, she could not allow herself to be led by every fear a man carried. "And you expect me to believe this?" Daenerys said, voice cool. "Because you say it with conviction." Jon Snow's mouth tightened. "I don't care if you believe me," he said. "I care if you live long enough to find out you should have." Tyrion took a step forward, voice smooth. "An effective argument," he said. "But kings usually bring proof." Davos lifted his hands in a helpless gesture. "We have proof," he said. "We've seen them. We've fought them. We..." Daenerys raised a hand. "Enough," she said, and Davos fell silent, eyes anxious. Daenerys looked at Jon Snow again. He was young, but there were lines at the corners of his eyes that belonged to older men. He looked like someone carrying a weight that did not fit him and refusing to drop it anyway. "What do you want from me?" Daenerys asked. Jon Snow answered without hesitation. "Dragonglass," he said, "and your help, when the time comes." Daenerys felt something shift inside her. Not softness, but recognition. This was not a lord asking for favor. This was a man asking for survival. Above, Drogon's eyes remained fixed on Jon Snow, unblinking, as if trying to decide what sort of creature this was. Daenerys held Jon's gaze and heard her own voice in her head. Fire for armies, not for children. If he spoke truth, then this was the war that would make all others meaningless. Then come inside, Daenerys said, and tell me everything. The great hall of Dragonstone was not warm despite the fire. The stone swallowed heat the way it swallowed light. Old dragon skulls and carved beasts lurked in shadows above, reminders that this place had been built by men who believed fear could be made into architecture. Daenerys stood near the hearth with Missandei behind her shoulder. Tyrion remained beside her, hands clasped, eyes sharp. Ser Barristan watched Jon Snow as if weighing him against every oath he had ever sworn. Grey Worm and unsullied guards lined the wall, silent. Jon Snow stood opposite with Davos Seaworth at his side. The Northerners who had come with them waited near the door, uneasy under the weight of dragon bones and foreign power. Jon's hand rested near the hilt of Longclaw, not in threat, but in habit. He spoke plainly, telling of hard home, of black water and screaming, of dead things that moved with hunger and cold purpose. He told of white shadows with eyes like blue flame. He told of whites that rose after death, of children with glassy stares, of men who fell and stood again, fighting for the enemy. As he spoke, the hall grew quiet in a way that made Daenerys aware of every crackle in the fire. Missandei's fingers tightened on her own hands. Tyrion's face shifted through disbelief to calculation. Ser Barristan's expression stayed solemn. He had lived long enough to know the world did not care what men thought impossible. "And you brought no proof," Daenerys said when Jon finished, voice controlled. Jon's jaw flexed. "We tried," he said. "We tried to bring one south. It didn't last long enough." Tyrion's voice was thoughtful. "Convenient for the story." Davos bristled. "It's not a story," he snapped, then seemed to remember himself and lowered his tone. "Begging your pardon, but we're not here for coin or castles. We're here because if the North falls, everything falls." Daenerys watched Jon Snow's face. He did not look like a man chasing power. He looked like a man chasing time. "And yet you call yourself king," Daenerys said, letting the words land. "A king who expects another ruler to give him weapons and men while he keeps his crown." Jon Snow's eyes narrowed. "I was chosen," he said, "and I don't care about crowns. I care about the living." "Many men say that," Daenerys replied. "Few mean it." Ser Barristan stepped forward, his voice measured. "Your Grace," he said, "if he speaks true, this is not a matter of politics." Daenerys kept her gaze on Jon. "Politics are always a matter," she said, "even at the edge of the world." Tyrion shifted, his tone gentle in the way of a man trying to guide a horse past a cliff. "There is another angle," he said. "If Dragonglass exists in quantity on this island, and if the North needs it, allowing them to mine it costs us little and gains us goodwill." Daenerys heard the calculation. Goodwill among the living. She also heard something else. A chance to show restraint, to show she was not the monster Cersei Promi said. Jon Snow leaned forward slightly. "I'm not asking you to fight my wars," he said. "I'm asking you to help us survive long enough to fight yours." The words struck cleanly. Daenerys felt her irritation waver, replaced by a cold understanding. If the dead came, cities would not matter. Armies would not matter. Dragons might not matter. Everything would become one war. She walked to the painted table visible beyond the hall's archway, gesturing for Jon to follow. He did, cautious but curious. Davos trailed behind. Tyrion and Missandei and Ser Barristan followed as well, their footsteps echoing. Daenerys placed her hand on the carved north, Winterfell, the wall, the vast emptiness beyond. "If you mine Dragonglass," she said, "you do it under my authority. You do it with my men watching. And you tell every lord who listens that I did not deny you." Jon Snow's eyes flicked to her hand on the north. "And what do you want from me?" he asked. Daenerys looked up at him. "Bend the knee," she said. The hall seemed to tighten. Davos inhaled sharply. Tyrion went very still, watching Jon's face like a man watching dice tumble. Jon Snow's gaze hardened. "I can't," he said. Daenerys felt heat rise in her chest, old and dangerous. "You can," she said, voice low. "And you will if you want my help." Jon Snow's jaw clenched. "The North won't kneel," he said. "Not after everything." Daenerys leaned closer, letting her voice become steel. "Then the North will stand alone," she said. "And if your dead come, they will stand over your bones." Davos stepped forward, voice strained. "Your Grace." Daenerys cut him off with a look. She did not want to be cruel. She wanted to be understood. There was a difference, but men often confused it. Jon Snow held her gaze, and for a moment Daenerys saw something in him that reminded her of herself. Stubbornness born of necessity. He was not posturing. He was rooted. She drew back slightly, breathing. "Mind the Dragonglass," she said at last, the words a controlled concession. "I will allow it, but do not mistake that for surrender. If what you say is true, then we will need each other whether we like it or not." Jon's eyes softened a fraction, not gratitude, but relief. "Thank you," he said, and the simplicity of it felt almost foreign in this hall of old dragons. Daenerys watched him, feeling the shape of a new war forming, one that would test her doctrine in ways fire could not solve. "Do not thank me," she said quietly. "Show me." If Jon Snow was to understand her, if Westeros was to understand her, it would not be through speeches in cold halls. It would be through seeing what dragons could do when they were not unleashed like madness. Daenerys chose a rocky field above the cliffs, a stretch of ground scarred by old volcanic flows. The sea crashed far below, sending up spray that salted the wind. Gray clouds rolled overhead, heavy and low, making the world feel close and tight. Unsullied moved across the field, dragging wooden frames and armor dummies into lines. Some dummies wore battered helms scavenged from shipwrecks. Others wore scraps of red cloth to mimic Lannister cloaks. Daenerys did not want to teach dragons to recognize colors, but she wanted her men to understand the targets. Soldiers, engines, supply lines. Not houses, not crowds. Grey Worm directed them with crisp gestures. Ser Barristan watched, hands clasped, his expression thoughtful. Tyrion stood near Missandei, cloak pulled tight, eyes flicking between dragons and the field as if weighing every risk. Jon Snow stood beside Daenerys at the cliff's edge, furs snapping in the wind. His eyes tracked Drogon as the dragon circled above, black against gray. "You train them like soldiers," Jon said, voice rough with awe and unease. Daenerys did not look away from Drogon. "They are soldiers," she replied. "They just happen to be made of fire." Jon's gaze shifted to the targets. "And the people?" he asked quietly. Daenerys felt the question like a hook. "The people," she said, "are the reason for the rules." She lifted her arm, signaling. Drogon dipped lower, wings beating in controlled rhythm. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, forming a staggered pattern. The dragons did not dive into a frenzy. They waited. That waiting was the proof. Daenerys pointed at the first line of wooden frames, mock siege engines built of timber and rope. "Burn," she commanded, her voice lost to wind but carried in her will. Drogon's fire erupted, a torrent that struck the frames and consumed them in a heartbeat. The wood vanished into flame and ash. The heat rolled up the cliff, warm even at their height, smelling of pitch and smoke. Rhaegal's green fire lanced across a second line, turning rope to glowing threads, collapsing the shapes into nothing. Viserion's pale flame followed, clean and bright, reducing the last frames to embers. Daenerys lifted her hand sharply. "Stop," she said. For a heartbeat, flame lingered in the air like an angry thought. Then the dragons' mouths closed. Smoke curled from nostrils. Wings beat, steadying. Jon Snow stared, his face unreadable. "They listened," he said. "They do," Daenerys replied. "Because I make them." Grey Worm signaled, and Unsullied dragged out barrels, empty but marked as if full. "Supply," Daenerys said to Jon. "Without food, without weapons, an army becomes desperate. Desperate men either surrender or become monsters. I prefer surrender." Jon's eyes flicked to her. "And if they choose monster," Daenerys felt the old heat stir. "Then I kill them in the field," she said, "where they have chosen to be." She pointed again. The dragons swept lower and burned the barrels. The flames caught and rolled, turning the ground into a brief inferno. The Unsullied held their line, faces expressionless even as heat washed over them. Discipline met fire and did not break. Jon Snow's gaze stayed fixed on the burning targets. "The North has never seen this," he said quietly. Daenerys glanced at him. "The North has seen worse," she replied. "You have seen the dead." Jon's jaw tightened. He looked away toward the sea, as if searching for the wall in the horizon's gray. "We need every weapon," he said. Daenerys watched the dragons circle back into their pattern, obedient even as their bodies trembled with the desire to burn more. Restraint was not natural to them. It was taught. It was forced. She felt Jon Snow watching her now, not the dragons. "Do you worry," he asked, "that your rules will fail when it matters?" Daenerys held his gaze. The wind tore at her hair. "Every day," she admitted. "That is why I drill them until the rules are not choices but instinct." Jon nodded slowly, as if understanding something beyond dragons. "Instinct," he echoed. "That's the only thing that holds when fear takes everything else." Daenerys looked out at the dark sea and felt, for a moment, the thin thread connecting her doctrine to the war Jon carried. Armies, cities, none of it would matter if the dead came. But if the living were to survive, they would need discipline as much as fire. "Let the Lord see this," Daenerys said, voice low. "Let them understand what I will do to their armies, and what I will not do to their people." Tyrion exhaled beside Missandei, half in relief, half in dread. The dragons wheeled, and their shadows moved across the rocky field like omens restrained by will. The first true Westerosi strike came under rain, because the gods of this land seemed to favor misery. The clouds hung low and heavy, spilling cold water that turned roads into mud and fields into sucking mire. The night was dark enough that torches looked like tiny, desperate prayers. Tyrion had chosen the target carefully. A Lannister supply column camped in an open field far from any village. Wagons drawn into a rough circle, horses tethered, soldiers huddled under canvas that sagged with rain. Siege parts were stacked under tarps. Barrels of grain sat like small fortunes. They were not headed to a battlefield. They were headed to feed an army, to keep Cersei's grip tight. "Cut the throat," Tyrion had said, "not the face." Daenerys rode Drogon above the clouds, where rain became mist and the world below was a blur of darkness and scattered flame. Rhaegal and Viserion held formation, wings beating steady. Beneath them, the Dothraki waited in the shadows like a held breath, horses restless, riders grinning in anticipation of blood. The Unsullied stood in disciplined silence, shields ready, spears angled, Grey Worm at their head. Jon Snow was there, cloaked and grim, watching from a ridge with Tyrion and Ser Barristan. He had insisted on seeing. Daenerys had allowed it. Let him learn what fire looked like when it was aimed. Daenerys guided Drogon down through rain. The camp's torches flared as men heard the approaching thunder of wings. Shouts rose, confused at first, then terrified. "Dragons!" someone screamed. "God's dragons!" Men scrambled for helmets, for spears, for scorpions that weren't there. Horses screamed, pulling against ropes, eyes rolling white. Daenerys felt Drogon's fire rising, eager, furious. She held it in place with will and knees and the hard words she had taught him. "Not yet." She pointed at the wagons, not the men. "Burn," she commanded. Drogon's flame struck the supply circle like a hammer. wood exploded into fire. Tarps went up in an instant, turning into shrieking cloth. Barrels burst, spilling grain that immediately blackened and smoked. The heat was so intense it drove rain away in hissing clouds, creating a brief, savage dome of steam. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, their fire cutting across stacks of siege parts, turning carefully crafted war into twisted metal and ash. The flames were bright enough to turn night into a grotesque day, faces lit in stark terror. Daenerys pulled Drogon up and away, refusing to linger. She saw men running, cloaks catching fire, and forced herself to look away from their suffering. She had aimed at wagons, but flame did not always respect intention. That was the cost of choosing fire as a weapon. Below, the Dothraki surged from darkness with a roar that matched the dragons. Horses thundered through mud, hoofs throwing up black water. Arroks flashed. The riders hit the camp's edge like a wave, cutting down those who tried to rally, driving others toward the open field where here was nowhere to hide. The Unsullied advanced in tight formation, shields locked, spears stabbing with brutal precision. They did not chase wildly. They held lines, cut off escape routes, turned chaos into controlled slaughter. Grey Worm's voice carried through the rain, short commands, sharp as spear points. The Unsullied moved like one body. Daenerys circled above, heart hammering, rain stinging her face. She watched men throw down swords and fall to their knees, hands raised in frantic surrender. She watched others try to form a line and fail as fire and fear shattered them. On the ridge, she saw Jon Snow's silhouette against the firelight, still as a statue. Tyrion stood beside him, cloak plastered to his body, face pale. Ser Barristan's white cloak looked ghostly in the rain, his posture rigid, as if holding himself back from stepping into the field. Daenerys guided Drogon lower, just enough to be seen. She did not burn. She let the dragon's shadow sweep over the kneeling men, let the heat of his presence make them tremble. "Drop your weapons," she shouted, voice raw. "Kneel and you live." Some obeyed immediately, sobbing, dropping swords into mud. Others hesitated, pride, fear, hatred, then flinched as Viserion's pale flame consumed the last intact wagon, the last hope of supply. A captain in red cloak staggered forward, face smeared with mud and soot. He fell to his knees, rain streaming down his cheeks like tears. "Mercy," he croaked. Daenerys stared down at him, and for a moment she felt the old temptation. To end it with fire, to make fear into certainty, to make surrender absolute. She forced the temptation back into its cage. She landed Drogon at the field's edge, where the mud steamed under his heat. She slid down, boots sinking, and walked toward the kneeling captain. The rain soaked her hair. Her cloak grew heavy. She felt cold in her bones despite the fire behind her. "You will live," Daenerys said, loud enough for others to hear. "You will return to your queen and tell her what happened here." The captain's eyes widened, disbelief and relief twisting his face. "Why?" he rasped. Daenerys leaned close enough that he could see her eyes clearly. "Because I am not here to burn your children," she said. "I am here to break your armies." She straightened and raised her voice, letting it carry through rain and smoke. "Any man who lays down his sword lives," she declared. "Any man who fights dies. Remember it." Around them, more swords dropped into mud. More men fell to their knees. The field became a place of surrender lit by fire that did not descend upon them. On the ridge, Jon Snow watched her as if seeing a new kind of power. Tyrion's shoulders loosened, just slightly, as if a breath he had been holding finally escaped. Ser Barristan's eyes glinted with something that might have been pride. The rain kept falling. The wagons kept burning. The night stank of smoke and wet earth and fear. Daenerys looked up at Drogon, the dragons circling above like living storms held in leash, and felt the doctrine she had sworn tighten around her like armor. Armies, she told herself, not cities.